Hi everyone, today we're doing the double exposure with text demo. So it's pretty similar to our practice, but with some stuff added. So I opened a new project. I'm naming it Ms.McCalmon underscore Photoshop self-portrait. That's the format you should save yours in. My width is 8.5 inches by 11 inches in portrait orientation, 300 pixels per inch. And once that's all set, I'm going to hit create. And I have my blank layer, so I'm going to open up my portrait image and copy and paste that there. And then I'm going to make sure I'm on that arrow so I can resize. And when you copy and paste it, when you resize, you don't have to hit shift because it's already locked in the correct orientation for you. So I want to make sure that my face is pretty large because this is a self-portrait. And that's why it's important to have a high quality image, because then when you zoom in, you don't want things to get too pixelated. Yep. And then once I have that where I want it, I am going to use my pen tool to isolate just my portrait. And I go through this pretty quick. And I kind of messed up around the shoulder, but then I backtracked. The more points you put down, the more details you're going to be able to get, the more curves. Kind of just around my hair. This is when I had short hair. And then all the way around. And when you're done, make sure you connect back to your first point. And don't hit enter. I'm just control 0 to get back. And then I'm right clicking and making my selection. And then I'm going down to that rectangle with the circle to make my vector mask, which is going to just isolate my portrait. And then I added a solid color layer and made it white, and that will be my background. I dragged it so it's behind my portrait, and then I'm labeling my portrait layer. These steps are very similar to the double exposure practice, so if you want to take a look at that video, I might go through some things a little bit slower from that. And then I am adding in my background, and this is a picture that I took. So I think that really adds to the self-portrait because it's a personal image. And I chose this image because it doesn't have, the sky is a nice blank background, so there's not too much in the way, and I really liked the shape and the texture of those rocks. And I'm going to do screen effect on that, and then use my arrow to drag that image to where I want it to be. And I kind of want those rocks to overlay where my face is. It's a little bit different than the trees, so depending on your image, it's going to be different than our practice. And then I can call that layer rocks. Very literal. And then I'm adding a layer, a black and white layer. And I'm right clicking to make that a clipping mask so it is only affecting the rocks. And then I'm using the high contrast blue filter. You can experiment and see what things look like with different filters. I like the blue because it really just takes the rocks shape and not so much of the sky. And you can adjust some of those, but I am going back to the default and then going back to the blue. And I'm happy with that, how that looks right now. But I'm going to move that a little bit so more of my hair is showing. You can always go back and move that background layer as you continue to work to see if it looks a little bit better one way or the other. And I'm okay with that for now. I'm going to add another layer, so that's that circle with the half black and white. And I'm going to add a levels layer. And I'm going to make that a clipping mask as well. And I'm calling this head just because I kind of want to see how it impacts the levels in my face and those details there. But it's different than that practice image we did. It's not showing the top of my head because I've kind of taken away all the values from the sky. So it's a little bit different. And I actually realized that I like the texture of the rocks showing through on my skin. In the practice image, I kind of wanted to take that texture away from the model's shirt. So this is really where your free choice kind of comes into play, what you prefer aesthetically. And then I make another levels layer, which I end up deleting actually because I wasn't focused on changing the area of the head, and I kind of like that texture showing through. So this is just me kind of playing through that and experimenting, which you should do too. Even though we had that demo, you don't have to continue to follow step by step. So I'm going to go and just right click and delete that layer eventually. You can just hit the backspace when that's selected or right click and hit delete layer. All right, so now that's kind of the basics of my double exposure. And I'm going to go back into my background layer. And when I change the color from white, which I will do next, so I double click on that. And if I take that down to more of a gray, some of those other rock details from the background start to show through, which I like. It connects a little bit more, so you're not kind of confused by why is my head shape cut out like that. But again, this is up to you. And then because I'm showing that background, I'm going to resize this so that all the edges of my background touch so I don't have that awkward border. And I pull that up a little bit so you can kind of see part of my head more. Yeah. And I like the way that looks. And I'm going to add the gradient map layer. So I'm going to choose which color I want to be my darkest, because right now it's inverted. So I'm thinking back to my personality test and my colors from my mind map. And a lot of the colors that kind of describe my personality are more cool tones, greens, blues, purples. So I think I'm going to have some darker green as my background tone. And you could spend forever experimenting with these colors. You can see that I'm pretty indecisive, and then I want to do a nice light blue for my highlights. And you can choose, so kind of across this gradient you have your values, your saturation, and then your hue as that sliding bar. So those are your three properties of color coming in. And I am kind of happy with that, and then I go back and adjust, and I go back and adjust, and I adjust, and I adjust, because I cannot make a decision. There's so many options. And then I am even darkening that background to have those rocks come through a bit more. And now I'm adding on top of everything a gradient fill. I don't want it to be that light color. I want it to So I'm color picking right from my image, but that's even a little bit light. And then I'm taking that down. This is just another effect. You don't have to have it. I'm just trying to show you some of the options that you have. You can experiment with how you want the gradient to go from light to dark. I chose colors that were a little bit darker and then a little bit lighter than my gradient map colors. But you could do something different. And then you can adjust the angle of your gradient, so where it comes from on the page, diagonal. I kind of like a slight diagonal, so I'm having it come from that bottom left corner. And then it takes the eye through my composition up to the right hand where I'm looking off. So kind of think about all of those elements of design, elements of art, principles of design. Think about where the eye is going to go through this image. Because even the direction that a subject is looking through a composition can create a visual path. It doesn't have to be line-based or specific image-based either. So another loom fail, I cut out adding my text, but you just hit that T and then you can type right into it. Or if you want to do something like our illuminated poster, you could do that, where you upload your own handwriting. That could contribute to your personal aspect. And my inventive and then the Ms. McCalmon are actually the same mid-tone color that I pulled from my composition. So that's a real life example of simultaneous contrast from the chapter. So you might want to put that into your final self-portrait. So that's my demo based on the double exposure and then with the text added. So you can give this one a try.